Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
All right. So, without any further ado, we will jump into Wonder Woman 1984. Now, Wonder Woman 1984 is a sequel to 2017's Wonder Woman, and it's the ninth installment in the DCEU. But it is also a prequel to of sorts to Batman v Superman. So when you're looking at this, it's going to be Wonder Woman 2017, then Wonder Woman 1984, then Batman v Superman and Justice League in terms of the timeline of Wonder Woman. And I just wanted to make that mention because both of the Wonder Woman films are set in the past from present, and even present in being the timeline of Batman v Superman and Justice League. So this film was directed by Patty Jenkins again. She returned, and it was written with Jeff Johns, which again I say is a plus for them and the success that they're having with their DCEU films. We've got Gal Gadot reprising her role as Diana, Wonder Woman. We have Chris Pine reprising his role as Steve Trevor, but we've also and Robin Wright and Connie Nielsen are in their roles respectively. But we're introducing two new actors. We have not new to Hollywood, but new to this franchise. We've got Pedro Pascal as Maxwell Lord, and we've got Kristen Wiig as Cheetah, or Dr. Barbara Minerva. I think that's her. Yeah, Barbara Minerva. And this film is set in 1984, as the title implies. And this was during the Cold War. Now, we are all familiar. All three of us lived through 1984. The 80s in general. And so you kids out there who weren't around in the 80s, this was an entirely different world than what you're used to right now. Our cutting edge technology were portable color TVs and Walkmans.
And the phone book was technology proof.
Right. And if you had a phone, this is a landline, that was a wireless phone that you could pick up off the charger and go all around the house and out on the porch, you thought you were somebody.
Yeah, you were rich if you had a wireless phone.
Right.
Mostly you were attached to the phone. You
right.
were attached.
Right, and VHS was king.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So we're just going to put all of that into perspective with this timeline. So Wonder Woman 1984 premiered on December 15th, 2020 via the DC Fandom virtual platform and was theatrically released in the United States by Warner Brothers on Christmas, December 25th, 2020. It's also made available to be streamed digitally on HBO Max for a month before it will go to premium video on demand. So this was a watch for me on Christmas. I don't have any little kids, so I didn't have to worry about watching somebody open up presents and all that great kind of stuff. It's like, my kids don't even live with me, so this all that time is done. I'm going to do what I want to do on Christmas. So that being said, I watched it, and I'm going to go into what I think about the film in just a moment, but I just want to give a brief overview or whatnot. This is set in 1984. Diana's working for a museum. She's grown accustomed to life in man's world. She's moving around a lot better, but she's not. I am Wonder Woman. It's not that kind of thing. You do see her interact with thwarting crime at a mall. that was a fun scene because it was the mall in the 80s, which was a popular hangout. And anyway, you see her thwart this crime, this theft, robbery being perpetrated. And you see all of the tropes from the comics. You see her throwing her tiara. You see her using the magic lasso. You see her jumping and running. And, you know, it to me, it was like watching an episode of the Linda Carter series, only better special effects and more well written.
Yeah, not to mention a year's worth of trailer clips showing moments from that was just driving me crazy.
Yeah,
This looks so good.
right. So we have that. You know, there's a dream stone that is being sought by Maxwell Lord so that he can control his own destiny and make his own destiny by making all his wishes come true. It's the monkey's paw type situation. And of course, you know, there are going to be some repercussions. And there are. You've got shy, timid Dr. Barbara Minerva, who befriends Diana, and she gets her wish. Diana gets her wish, and Maxwell Lord gets his wish. But wishes, as we know, even from Aladdin, carry consequences. And this one abounds because it's like you can't get something from nothing, and there's a very definite cause and effect, which drives a lot of the film. Now, with this movie, we can go through what parts of the movie we liked and how we felt or whatnot. I'm going to give my grade early, and the reason why I'm doing this is because then I can feel free to talk about why I gave it this grade and all of that. So I give this film a C+. And that's a big drop from the A that I gave the first film. I liked this film, and there were a lot more visuals and, of course, nostalgia and things of that nature that I enjoyed about the film, which is why it doesn't get a failing grade for me that a lot of people are giving it in social media and at rating sites, around the net.
So is that a 2.5? What would you put that?
That in a number scale, I'd probably put it at a 3.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if 5 was an A, then 4 was a B, and then 3 was a C, then I would give that a 3. Yeah. So that being said, I think that there's a lot to like about this film from a fan perspective, but from a movie viewer perspective, there's quite a bit of problems that this film has. It suffers from quite a few problems in that regard, and I think that I think that where it was trying to go and what it was trying to do, it hits like maybe 3 out of 5 of those things, which is why I gave it the C+. And those other 2, they missed the mark. It could have been much more well written, and it could have been much more realized within the potential for the characters and the character development as the story goes. So that is where my grade is, and that's where I'm at with this film.
All right. Do you want to go next, or shall I, Diane? Diane, why am I calling you Diane?
I'll take it. Diana Prince, thank you.
There you go.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I'll go next. So, all right. So if we're just going to do the general overview, I'm going to say I was very frustrated with the releasing of this movie. we had, as a fan, we had to wait a really long time for this film. It was originally going to come out November of last year, was its original release date. And then they moved it to June, and I had to be happy with that. And then COVID hit, and obviously you can't blame the studio for not releasing it during that time, but it just was like, well, doesn't that figure, you know? So I can remember when we got to June, I was thinking, in another universe, I'd be watching this movie now, and then month after month, and we weren't sure what was going on with it. That was a very frustrating period of time for being a Wonder Woman fan. Danielle, you didn't know me back then, but in 2017, when Wonder Woman did as well as it was, I was really obnoxious on my Facebook page. I'm not even gonna lie. I posted all the headlines, all the cartoons, all the big news. I mean, I was so excited, and I love the fact I don't hate Justice League. I know that movie gets a bad rap. I especially like the fact that they went back and they filmed some additional parts with Gal Gadot, because the Wonder Woman movie took off, and they had to go back and put more of her in it, and that just put a big fat smile on my face. I thought that was great. And I thought that the movie itself is kind of a mixed bag, but I loved her parts in it. I thought that well, without getting too far into it, I was really excited for this second movie. So I wasn't sure how this mixed release thing was going to go. And on Christmas Day, I have a family commitment. There was no seeing it on Christmas Day. It wasn't going to happen. But that ended up working out to my advantage, because we also have a mom and pop movie theater here in Mooresville that actually co-sponsors this show when they're doing better. And at Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, they've all heard the commercials for that here on the show. And it was very important to me, because circumstances worked out. I was able to take my entire family to go and actually see it on the big screen. I knew it was a safe activity. Not without getting too much into it, but pretty much we'd already had our bouts with COVID. We knew that we all had the antibodies. We didn't have to worry about it so much. So we put on our masks and we did our social distancing, but I decided, we're going to go, if I'm going to, if anything good was going to come of that, at least I could go and enjoy it on the big screen. And I don't know how much of a difference that may be made, but on the big screen, it was quite a spectacle to me. The opening sequence back on Themyscira that a lot of people kind of poo-poo a little bit, just amazing. I thought it was absolutely amazing watching it there. I could go on and on about it. The feels for me on this one were bigger for me personally. The reasons why require spoilers, so I'm not going to explain what I mean at this point, but there were scenes in there that I was moved to tears in a couple of different spots, which that didn't happen in the first movie. As much as I like the first one, and as much as in some ways I think it is a stronger movie, this one had more that moved me personally. A lot of people like to compare this to like Spider-Man 3, which I think is a completely unfair comparison, because as a huge Spider-Man fan, I have strong opinions about that movie too. I don't see them as comparable, and I'll get into why that is when we get into spoilers. So it was a flawed movie. There's certainly no way to dance around that. The movie had problems, and to me, that a lot of behind the scenes stuff had to have been going on for it to come out and have some of the obvious problems that it had. But I mean, keeping it completely honest, there were more good things for me than there were bad, and I was really shocked within this past week to see all the backlash going on, because there were so many things that worked so well for me. So my rating on this is that I had a really good time. I've seen, as a Wonder Woman fan, I had a lot of positive things to say about it, and I've seen lots of other Wonder Woman fans come out in defense of it and say it, it moved me to tears. It was absolutely joyful and enthralling, and problems acknowledged. I came in at pretty much a 3.5. I plan to own this as soon as it comes out. And one thing I do, probably the biggest advantage to the delay, is that Pedro Pascal means a lot more to me now. Than he would have a year ago. I mean, I've been like, okay, that I recognize that name from The Mandalorian, but I mean, I've been so much more exposed to him that I could more greatly appreciate his performance in this movie than I think I would have a year ago. So seeing him kind of stretch from The Mandalorian and doing what he did, and I thought he did a fine job, I think was one of the pluses here. So I've not seen it on HBO Max, but I did very much enjoy my viewing on the big screen, and that kind of sets me up for the rest of it. How about you?
So I did watch it Christmas Day. I have HBO Max, so I watched it at home. I would have loved to have gone to see it in the theater, but we've been staying away from the public as much as possible. So, but that's okay. We have a pretty good setup upstairs. I have a husband who's a sound guy, so our sound system for our movies is lovely, and we have a pretty big TV. So, it's good, and I'll take it. But yeah, and I don't have kids, so we do whatever the heck we want on Christmas Day, and so we watched it that day. But we watched it later in the day, and I, of course, since everybody knows I'm a Wonder Woman fan, I was already getting people texting me and sending me messages. Oh my God, it's the worst movie I've ever seen, and on and on. And I was like, oh, stop talking to me. I haven't watched it yet. So when I did sit down to it, I already had two things in mind, even before people were texting me. One was that I was positive it was not going to be as good as the first one. I'm like, it's just not possible. I guess it's possible, but the odds of a sequel being as good, if not better than the first movie, are very slim. So I was like, I'm just going to go into it knowing that it's Wonder Woman, and I'm going to try to enjoy it. And then once I started hearing all this stuff from everybody, I was like, all right, I really need to prepare myself to not like this movie. Right. So, but I don't know. I was like, I'm going to like it. I know I will. And I did. I liked it. Of course, it's not as good as the first one. The first one is this amazing, deep story. The second one is set in the 80s. Like, I don't know why people have decided to romanticize the 80s, but I mean, it's the 80s. Like, for those of us who grew up in the 80s, it was a ridiculous time. Well, I don't want to talk about the movie yet. I don't want to spoil anything in the movie, but
The 80s has the advantage of being surrounded by the 70s and the 90s. So
Yes, and
I'm just saying.
and it was the height of pop culture. So we can take the TV shows and the music and claim that as one of the good things in the 80s.
But if you go back to the and I mean, this could be its own conversation, but if you go back to the 80s, it had just as many crappy TV shows, just as many crappy songs as other eras. But for some reason, we're only going to remember, and even the good stuff, like, it was such a cheesy era. Like, it was neon, it was huge hair. It was, I mean, and I love the 80s. I grew up in it, but I love it because it was so goofy. It was such a goofy time. And, so to me, setting this movie in the 80s, I know everybody's doing it. That's why they did it. Everybody's setting everything in the 80s. Although that's starting to change. If you're noticing now, more 90s stuff is starting to come back because those kids are getting of age that they're in charge of stuff. So now it's going to start to be all 90s again. And I'm excited to see what the kids who grew up during this second 80s phase, what's their version of 2000s 80s going to be? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I went on a tangent. Anyway, back to Wonder Woman. I'm sorry. So going into this movie, I just knew it was going to be a different vibe, and I was okay with that because I was still going to get Wonder Woman, you know? Like you have both said, I agree that there are problems with the script, but I think this one was much more a superhero movie than the first one. This one to me felt more, here's a superhero movie. And I don't know why that turned so many people off. I think because they wanted the first one again, first kind of public speaking on Wonder Woman. I haven't talked to the friends who wrote me and the people who have talked about it badly. I have some friends who liked it, so I've talked to them about it. But I feel like I spend a lot of my time defending movies in this realm of stuff, meaning superheroes or sci-fi movies. I feel like I'm always the one who's like, you guys, why can't you just enjoy it? Just enjoy it for what it is. You know, why are we being so deep about a movie set in the 80s? Come on, you guys. Like, this is fun. We have Wonder Woman. It's fun. Like, just enjoy it. But so I haven't really been talking about it much. So it'll be kind of nice to be able to share my thoughts on it. But I had a fun time watching it. I've watched it twice now. I liked it even more the second time I watched it because I knew what I was going into. Like once you watch it that first time, you kind of have those expectations. And then, so then when you know what you're going into, then it was just like, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this movie the second time I watched it. Mm-hmm. And I really did. And
to your point, I don't remember when I went in on the 26th to the movie theater. I don't remember if I had gotten any of that negative buzz yet. I think that was a bit after, but I knew when I finished watching the movie, it was going to be divisive.
Yeah.
To be honest, some of the things I hadn't given a whole lot of thought, but I remember going, this plot is off the chain. That was crazy. I knew some people weren't going to like the fact that magic is such a big part of the plot because that part was so different from the first movie. But I knew it was going to be a divisive film, but I did not expect the backlash to be as intense as it ended up being. We'll get more into that, but I wish I could remember if I had heard anything beforehand. But I do remember it was not long after, because I have like 4 or 5 reviewers that I check in with regularly, and just now there was one guy who really liked it, and the other 4 did not, and there were some people who devoted like an hour and a half just to trashing it and that kind of stuff, and it just I thought I got a little crazy when I heard some of the stuff, but we'll get into that later. Did you give your review, point
my
review?
rating? I did not. I would give it somewhere between like a 3.5 and a 3.75. Can I give a 3.75?
I have.
That's what I want to give. 3.7.
I've given 0.75s before, I know, and I think John has too.
Well, what letter grade would you give it?
Like a B. A B.
Yeah.
Like not a B minus, not a B plus, like a B.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one other thing before we get into spoilers or whatnot. I really enjoyed the fact that it was the 80s, and from a perspective of a comic book fan, when we go back to the George Perez era of the comics and seeing how vibrant the colors popped, and there was a homage to the Greek mythology, which the opening scene in this film highlights. I was all for it. Being a child of the 80s, going back to what Danielle was saying, I think that why that era and that decade is so fond to in my heart to me was because it was a time when I was at the height of my life. I was a teenager, I was immortal. The music was just, I mean, you know, it was just like a songbook of everything that I was going through and in life. And I think a lot of people, when you grow up in a decade, I think that's what you remember. I mean, politically, it was a shitty time. You know,
Yeah.
I
I couldn't
mean,
appreciate that at the time, but
I mean,
definitely.
right. You know, we were kind of, as kids, we were kind of insulated from that. I mean, we did have to understand some things because I'm sure we all probably had some part-time jobs somewhere and thought, wow, you know, I wish I had a little bit more extra spending money. But the idea that you had spending money and you had a car and you were growing up in this time frame and all that, I think that the pop culture from that era is what sustains it so much with everyone. And I think that a lot of the artists who came into fame during that time and a lot of the movies, the coming of age movies that came into popularity at that time are so ingrained in pop culture that you can't have pop culture without those things. And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the most endearing things about it. And like RJ, you said, insulated by the 70s and the 90s, which we were around for those eras too. It just wasn't as prevalent. You know, I mean, I'm a big disco fan. I love disco fan music from the time I was a little kid. So, you know, and soft rock from the 70s. I mean, I remember it, but I wasn't getting my first kiss in that decade. I wasn't going to high school in that decade. Although I remember it, have fond memories of the music, the television shows, and everything like that. It didn't have the same effect as the 80s had on me as a coming of age time. And then the 90s as an adult, as a young adult into my 20s, that I had to come to grips with adulting, which is and being a parent, which was an entirely different skill set, you know, but also appreciating the advancements that were being made. And one other thing I want to say about the 80s is that it was a time technologically that was very much of a development. You know, we lived in the 70s. We didn't have CDs. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have VCRs and all of this. The 80s gave us so much technologically. And then now we've got personal computers in the form of the TRS-80 and the Commodore 64, and we've got VHS, and we've got all of these, you know, Blockbuster, and we've got all these other things that are coming to prominence in that decade. And I think this film made fun of those things in a way, you know, lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek way of being the era, the decade of excess, and having all of these accumulations of things and people being so like, you know, greedy about wealth accumulation. You know, this was the time of the, what was the Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas? You know, this was that era. You know, a lot of these things were actually put into play in this film and done very well. So I'm glad that they put it in the 80s because I don't know if this would have done as well in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong about the 80s. Don't get me wrong. I grew up in the 80s. That, you know, it was fine. It's just, to me, it's always so funny when people are like, oh my God, the 80s were the best. And I'm like, we had parachute pants and crimped hair. Like, I set my hair on fire in science class because there was so much hairspray in it. Like, I mean, we were pretty goofy back then, and I'm talking about the kids. You know, old people, they had their own thing going on then. But
yeah, my recollection of the 80s is it was extremely optimistic, and yet we had this fear of nuclear war always kind of in the background all the time.
Oh, I was positive the Russians were coming to get me, and I was going to have to be a Wolverine. I was positive that was going to happen to me.
Yep. And yet everybody, it seemed like everyone was partying all the time. Everything
Right.
was good. Everything was pretty good. I mean, I had a great time as a teenager in the 80s. And then I can remember music specifically bottoming out in the 90s, where it was just like, what the hell happened?
It depends on who you ask. I was part of the grunge era. I loved grunge.
The grunge, I'm talking after that, though, kind of when you get into the late 90s, early 2000s is
Right.
Yeah.
But seeing like 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we're only going to remember the good songs that came out now. And there are good songs that have come out. And we're only going to, it's the same thing that's happening. We're only going to, because ask your parents how great the 80s were. They're going to be
I know. I heard about it at the time.
Yeah,
Well,
right. But I'm saying, unfortunately now that's us. We're the ones who are like, back in my day, I used to listen to great bands like Journey, and I don't get me wrong.
But it's funny. It's funny that those songs from those bands are being used and redone by the kids today. And I think that that's a testimony to how great the songs were that they want to redo them. Although I will admit I am the old man saying "Get Off My Lawn" because I think the remake sucked. But that's just
I'm tired. And I know we're talking about a sequel right now, but I am so tired of remakes and sequels and redos and reboots and everything. Maybe all the ideas are gone. I don't know. But let's do something new. Something new.
I'm sure John and I have strong opinions about that.
Oh, man.
I hate reboots. I mean, very rarely have I come across something that was rebooted that I thought, okay, I'm going to watch this or I like it. And sometimes it has to grow on me to the point where someone else around me is watching it and I just jump on the bandwagon because it's there. But as a general rule, I hate when people reboot something. It's like I have fond memories of the original and I don't want them tarnished by some young upstarts coming along and
I'm shaking my cane.
Right, or setting it in a different era, which takes away from what its original intentions and what made it special were.
Right. But it's the same thing with music. It's the same thing. They're doing the same thing. I don't need to write a new song. I'm just going to take this old song that people like and I'm going to kind of change it so that now it works for now. And it's like,
it was cool.
Yeah.
It was cool when hip hop did it because they took a swing on it. But now you've gotten to the point where it's like R&B songs or rock songs are just taking snippets of old music and just putting it into music. And then they all have this monotone type of sound. And it's like, how creative is that? I mean, my stepdaughter was here for my wife's birthday, which is tomorrow, but we're celebrating it early. And so she, my granddaughter had this hoodie on and had this performer. I didn't know who this young lady was. And they told me who she was. And I asked my Echo to go ahead and play one of these songs. I said, well, what's a popular song? So I could hear it, right? And I'm listening to this song, and this song, they're talking about how great her voice was, right? And I'm looking at this, I'm listening to this, and I'm like, what's so great about her voice? Because I couldn't tell if she had a good voice or not because they had put the computer effects in the back to make it to where I couldn't tell if she had a good voice or not because it sounded like every other R&B singer who's coming out today. And that, sure, we had synthesizers, but you could definitely tell Steve Perry's voice from Sting. And they had their own styles and inflections on how they held notes and everything. So, yeah, you could say that there's a lot of repetition in music within the eras or within the decades, but you recognize everybody's individual style. Now it sounds like, Ben Stein everybody's taking their cue from him. Everybody has that same sound. And it's like, how are you thinking that this is great. Yeah, I'm the old man. Get off my lawn now, and I own it.
Right.
Yeah, it's corporations. We could probably go down this rabbit
I know.
hole quite a way.
Yeah, we could, but
That's
let's
not how we were talking about Wonder Woman.
right. Let's get
Mm.
back to Wonder Woman 1984, folks.
There we go.
So,
Is it spoiler section time?
spoilers. So if you kids have not seen Wonder Woman 1984, then I suggest that you do not watch this at this time. Go watch the film and then come back and enjoy our commentary on the film moving forward from this point. So,
And the controversies.
yes. So you have been warned. This is spoiler territory. So now we get into the nitty gritty.
Mhm.
Did one of you guys want to start first?
I don't even know where I'd start.
Well, I put a list together of the things I heard mentioned most often. Do we just want to get into like the criticisms and kind
Yeah.
of like tick those off?
Yeah, we can go ahead and get into the criticisms. Did you want to start that off, RJ?
Sure. Here's one I really want to comment on. I put it at the top of this list. Is this common? Okay, so you all remember how much everyone loved the first movie, and then the second movie comes out, and these angry nerd boys are going, Patty Jenkins doesn't get Wonder Woman. And I had a very strong response. I think it's so funny that you know, when the first movie came out, everyone was so sure it was going to fail, and now that it's kind of like now we're somewhere in between. Somehow the person that got all the credit now gets all the blame, and the contradiction there kind of makes me smile. But more to the point, I want to defend Patty Jenkins' vision here a little bit, because understanding Wonder Woman is not an easy thing. I think John can back me up here. He can step in if I overstated. I don't believe this is an exaggeration, but you can take Spider-Man or Superman or especially Batman, and you can jump in about every 10 years, and the setting is going to be fairly consistent, and the character is going to be pretty consistent. Yeah, there's going to be changes from era to era, but it's going to be recognizably the same character. With Wonder Woman, like, she is completely different every few years. It's like every time a new writer comes along, it's almost like they scrap everything and try and create a completely different vision. She becomes someone completely different, and it's one of the things that was so frustrating for me reading the comic books, because I saw this happen 2 or 3 different times, where as soon as another writer comes along, it's like, oh, forget all of her backstory, forget all of her supporting characters. We're going to move her to a completely different city, create a whole new different cast, and we're just going to basically start her completely over. And maybe she doesn't work for the government. It just depends on how that writer feels, you know. So she's been through a lot. So defining exactly who Wonder Woman is, and then you got the Linda Carter factor, because so many people pin their memories on what they thought they remembered Linda Carter being back in the 70s. And when you say, so to me, Patty Jenkins' challenge from the beginning has always been, let's distill all of that history, all of those contradictions, all of those things, and try and create something for the big screen. And so I thought that I really enjoyed what she did. Is it my Wonder Woman? No. Is it Linda Carter's Wonder Woman? No. Is it any one specific comic interpretation? It's not. But I think it is consistently distilling all these different ideas of who Wonder Woman has been at various times, and I find her vision as legitimate as any other out there. So anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say a hard thing with Wonder Woman, besides all the stuff you just mentioned, is the fact that she's immortal. With Wonder Woman, with this Wonder Woman in particular, she's immortal. And so that just means that she can span any decade. She can go from, if she's starting out in World War I, you know, going like skipping all the way to the 80s does take away a lot of story in between there, but she can go forever. So yes, it's very hard to take this story that you know, the first story that everybody really loved and these characters that they really loved from the first story, and now none of them can exist, you know, because they're not alive anymore.
Right.
Yes. Or if they are alive, they're, who knows, they're so old that they don't know what's going on. But P.S. that picture of her and Etta that's on her mantle, I was just like, I love Etta so much. I've always loved Etta, but like I was like, oh my God, here she is with Etta. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, so it's tough because it's like, you have to keep, if you want to keep doing these movies, you have to figure out how to keep people engaged when you're having to introduce all new characters every time. So yeah, that was something. I did want to mention that it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people forgot the fact that when the first one came out, they hated the Ares stuff at the end. They didn't like that. Mm-hmm. And that was the big thing then, was that, oh, that was so stupid when Ares came out and then she was fighting Ares. And that was just such a stupid ending. But now we don't talk about that anymore. Now this one's really stupid. Oh, the first one was the best movie I ever saw. And this one was dumb. And I'm like, like, here's that argument I get to have again with people over and over again of, yeah, remember how what you said about the first one? Oh no, you don't remember that anymore? Okay, cool. Let's move on. So, so I think I loved, a lot of the things that came into play in this one. Like RJ said, we brought in a lot of the magic and these powers that Wonder Woman has that we didn't see in the first movie. And you can chalk that up to, well, now she's been in the human world for all these years, and you know, who knows what's been happening in that time and what she's had to deal with and what she's learned over that time. And you know, and then for her to learn to find these powers that she had and learn them in this movie, and we got to see it happen. Like, come on, that was so cool. Her flying. Mm-hmm. Oh, God, I love that scene so much. When she made the jet invisible, I was just like, oh, it's happening. She's going to make the jet invisible. Like, that happened a lot when I was watching this. I would turn to my husband. I'd be like, oh my God, she's going to fly. Oh my God, the jet. Oh my God. Like, that was me through most of the movie. So.
Well, I would like to piggyback on that to say that when it comes to this film and a lot of the tropes from the comics and from the television series and all the other interpretations of the character that are brought to bear in this particular film, those are some of the things that I enjoyed the most. That's what I liked about this film.
Right.
And like you had said before, Danielle, this is more of a superhero film than the first one, which was also something that I enjoyed a lot more and appreciated a lot more. It's not easy to take all of this history of this character and put it into 2 hours. It's just not. It's not going to be easy for any character, even the more well-known characters like Superman and Batman. It's just not, because then at this point with those two characters, you have to balance out how much of the origin do I need to retell because they are so popular. You know, we don't need to go for Superman, for instance, we don't need to start on Krypton and go all the way to Earth and then go, you know, we can just show a scene as it means something, and what Man of Steel did that ties it together. But with Wonder Woman, since there had not been so many movie iterations of this character, they had to do an origin story and in the first film. And that was just something that they had to do. Now we have this film, which starts out with Diana as a child competing in games in Themyscira and learning some values that are going to shape the woman that she is. And this plays into the theme of the story. Diana tried to.
What? But John, so many people said that had no purpose in the rest of the movie.
Well, that's because they weren't paying attention. And
What?
imagine that. But Diana tried to cheat in the competition and she was caught, and thus disqualified from winning or being part of the winning circle. Now we go and fast forward to 1984 and we see Maxwell Lord, who is trying to cheat his way to success, fame, and riches.
But that would be thematically connected.
Oh,
yeah. See how that works, boys and girls? Now rewatch the film and then you'll get it, okay? But so then we have Maxwell Lord, who was a character created in this era back in the day, and in the comics, and being able to be brought forth and manifested in this film in this era, which was really cool to see. But he is trying to cheat, and inadvertently, Diana and Dr. Barbara Minerva are trying to cheat, but not with the purpose of cheating, but with the longing of something that's missing in their lives. Unbeknownst that what they held in their hand at this time was something that could grant them this. And this is going to lead into a problem that I have with this film, and I'm sure you probably can guess what it is. And it's how Steve Trevor was brought back. Okay, so first off, let me say that when they said they were bringing Steve Trevor back for the second movie, I was like, oh Lord, how are they going to do this? And in what context? So that put up a red flag for me, but I'm optimistic enough to say it's Wonder Woman. I like the first film. Let's see what they do. So it becomes this monkey paws thing where and it also becomes this rule of magic. You can't create something, and the conservation of matter for that matter, you can't create something from nothing. There's a penalty for magic use that you have to pay, and energy cannot, and matter cannot be created. It can only be changed in form. So all of these things apply to this situation, and that Diana longed to have Steve Trevor back. But since he was disintegrated in this airplane explosion, like almost 100 years ago, there's no way to put all of those pieces back together. It's a Humpty Dumpty situation if there was any DNA left. That being said, they decided that they were going to take some innocent guy who was living his life, living his best.
We don't know he was innocent. You don't know his backstory?
Yeah, well, we know he was innocent, that he didn't ask to be assimilated into some dead guy from over 60 years. But, that being said, they put Steve Trevor taking over this person's body. Now, in all fairness, had this been switched, we'd have had a big problem. And I didn't like it. It felt creepy.
You're not alone.
Oh yeah.
And I thought that this was just like, ugh. And if it had been a woman and switched, I would have thought really ugh. And then had, the writers and Patty Jenkins thought about this maybe a little bit more, and they might have went a different direction. Here's the direction I was hoping that they were go into, which goes back to the TV show. In the very beginning of the TV show, when Wonder Woman, the TV show, was set in the 40s, you had Steve Trevor Sr. When it was when the series went into modern day, which was the 70s, you had Steve Trevor Jr. I didn't mean for it. Well, obviously, it wouldn't be Steve Trevor Sr. and Steve Trevor Jr. because that's 60 years from the time he died to the time that this film takes place. Yeah, it would have been an old man. So we couldn't do it that way. My thoughts were it would be a descendant of Steve who happens to look a lot like him, who also shares his name. And when she wishes for him to come back, it's bringing this person into her life, and he has dormant memories of his ancestor because, you know, we have ancestral DNA memories from our past, from our ancestors, you know. So I thought that that's the way it would go. And I think that if that was the way that it went, it would have made for a better story and people wouldn't have been so creeped out by it.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
I still kind of feel like, and I'll go down, we'll go down this path, obviously, but I think no matter what, unless you're bringing back actual Steve, it's the same thing. His ancestor, I mean, if you're saying that him coming into someone else's body, doesn't matter that they're related, it's still someone else's body. So if that's the problem, then you can't do it unless it's like, we took the molecules known as Steve Trevor that exploded in the first one, and somehow they came back together, and it's Steve.
Well, you know? So, and in that sense, yeah, but within the context of DC and their mythos, they do also rely heavily on reincarnation, and that in and of itself would have been, it would have been kind of creepy, but it would have been way less creepy to me than having some other completely different dude, not related to the situation at all, even genetically or any kind of way, just being one day waking up. I mean, dude just went to bed. He went to sleep, and then he woke up like a week later and was like, well, what happened? You know, and
where'd my Pop-Tarts go?
Right. You know, where my Pop-Tarts? You know, I mean, and if that had been the case, the way that I had presented it, at least that would have led into the idea that Steve Trevor's back. And from that point, it could have led into how they retcon things in the present to where they could have made him old. Because he would have been like maybe 30s in the 80s. So that would make him like 65 now. So then they could show him in this present day film as her original Steve Trevor's descendant as an old man, and they could have played off of that. I thought that would have been cool. There aren't any clear-cut ways to have brought him back that didn't have problems. We know that because the whole idea of him coming back is just like, how are you going to do this? But I just thought it was especially weird that they chose to take some random guy and have him wake up as Steve Trevor, and then her to have sex with this guy. And then well, you got to let me go, Diana. I'm already gone. And then he fades around the corner. And then dude just, wait, how did I get here? What's going on? Where have I been for the past week? You know, I mean, and then they don't show it. She's just running down the street and dude's around the corner, like turning back into himself. It just seemed off-putting to me from a personal standpoint. And I thought that was one of the things about the film that I really just didn't like.
What was weird for me is how they intentionally don't comment on it the whole time it's happening. It feels like they edited around a plot point. Right. And it may be like 6 months before we know what that might be, because we know everyone's under contract now, but it felt like someone did some scene reshuffling, because it's really hard for me to believe that no one decided this needed to be commented on throughout the entire story. And it seems so unnecessary. Like, he could have just appeared. I mean, that was totally within the realm of the power we're dealing with. So the fact that they had him come into someone else's body, I've seen some theories like, was this supposed to be a significant DC character that they then decided they weren't going to do? Did they rewrite it, in midstream and go, well, now we need to change that and make him someone else? I don't know. No one really knows, but it's done so oddly and not commented upon. So much so that I initially didn't give it a lot of thought. And then, of course, I saw the blowback and I'm like, yeah, that is really, really weird, especially since they make a point of showing Diana is morally conflicted about it, but not about what you would think she'd be conflicted about, like
The one
she's bothered she has to give Steve up, but she's not bothered that this is someone else's body that's been inhabiting his space all this time. And it's so intentionally not commented on, and it is a very weird choice, and it is hard for me to wrap my brain around that part of it. Where I justify it as far as I do justify it, I'll admit not everyone's going to know or is going to accept it. But to me, what Diana missed Steve so much, she was going to get him back somehow. And I don't think she looked any further than, I've got Steve back, period. That's it. And now that I've got him, I'm going to do anything I can to keep him. And I don't even think she even gave any thought to the rest of it so much, because I believe what she was seeing is what the camera was showing us. She wasn't seeing that other guy.
Oh, she wasn't.
Yeah.
And they see much.
Does that make it right? No. Does that fix the problem? No. But intent, to me, the people that are using like comparisons to like a date rape drug and this sort of stuff, it's like she didn't go out and roofie somebody.
No.
She didn't go out and intentionally victimize anybody. She made a wish, and then she was stuck with the circumstances that she was handed. I do wish they had commented on it, and I'm sure my gut feeling is we will find out what that was supposed to be about, and right now we just don't know. It is a weird part of the movie, and I know Danielle's just dying to get a comment in, so I'm going to let her talk for a while.
Let me talk. Okay. So I'll start off with the super cheesy thing, because you just talked about it, RJ. And I already warned my husband that I was going to say this, so he's prepared, because we're not usually very cheesy with each other in public, but it's happening. It's going to happen right now. I told him, I said, look, if you were to die for some reason, and then I made a wish and you came back in somebody else's body, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care. If I knew it was you in there, I wouldn't care whose body it was, because I would, like you said, what I want is you back. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened for her. She got the love of her life came back to her. And I think, again, I totally understand what people are saying about it and the creepiness factor of it. But I also think you need to remember we're in this superhero world. There's weird crap that happens in superhero worlds that we just kind of go, we're going to look the other way on all of this stuff. And then when we say, okay, this magic happened where Steve Trevor's soul or whatever is now in this person's body, like, we get really analytical about it. And it's like, whereas we can't just be like, cool, yay, she got Steve back. Isn't that nice? And I'll be interested to see, I like you said, were there things missing? Did they leave things out about the whole thing because things got deleted? I don't know. Or is this going to be like a C-3PO not knowing Anakin, even though Anakin built him thing, where later, like maybe in the next movie, she's like, yeah, I married that guy. I don't know. Or whatever. I don't know. Somehow it will come up later and it will be talked about and we'll all go, oh, okay, cool. Then we'll accept what it was. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen with it. But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I got what they were doing. I understood it on that level of wanting the love of your life back. And all you're seeing is the love of your life. You're
Right.
not really thinking about anything else besides the fact that you now have this person that you have been longing for what would you say, probably
60
70,
plus years.
70 years. Yeah. All you've been thinking about is this guy. And now here he is standing in front of you, and you're not seeing that other guy, and you're seeing him. Now, for my justification of it, I've given him a backstory, the other guy, and he wasn't a good guy. So, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, he has his own. Yeah, he was sleeping off a bender. He doesn't know what was going on. For him, for a week, he was like, "Yeah, I got really drunk. I don't know."
see, yeah, that's what I figure he thinks happened.
Right, right.
Well, I would like to say that with regards to that, I don't get me wrong. I get where she was coming from with that, and I totally understand that wholeheartedly. I guess my thoughts were, I don't like the way it was written. I'm never gonna like it. I'll understand it.
Sure.
It's just, to me, it's just kind of dirty and creepy to me, and I always will think that they could have handled it better. And I get what you're saying,
It was
Danielle.
sloppy writing, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
I get
I
what
agree.
you're saying, Danielle, that, it's a superhero movie. There's all kinds of take your brain out of this. I mean, you could overanalyze this down to the physics of how things happen. But I mean, I think that, when it comes down to it, we go back to the opening scene. Diana realizes that she can't cheat.
Right.
There's repercussions for cheating, and her wishing Steve back after he's gone is a cheat.
Wait,
But
you're tying it to the front again, dude. What? But that part didn't fit.
But I don't think she knew she didn't know she was doing it. She didn't know she was wishing him back. She
didn't know. There was none of that. And that's the great part. But the whole thing is that, you can't change the circumstances once it's written that way, but they both knew that wasn't really him. It was his spirit and what she was seeing magically, in somebody else, who at the end of the film turns up to her and says, I didn't think I'd be able to pull this off. And then they're going smiling at each other. And I'm like, you already had sex with it. You guys might as well go ahead and hook up, because Steve's not coming back. I mean,
I turned to my husband and I was like, if that guy only knew.
Right. So, I mean,
right.
I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not like, making this like this. I'm not angry about it. I just thought it was kind of sleazy and nasty when I think about it.
Yeah, I wish it were handled
differently. If I had sex with Diana Prince, I would have wanted to remember every moment.
Well, yeah. I do think, so for me, that whole thing was just, like you said, it's just kind of badly written. And I hope and this goes back to the whole immortality and all this time. There would have been nobody from the first movie in this one if we didn't bring Steve back.
Right.
So you wanted to have some kind of tie-in, some kind of relationship that she had from that first movie. And they did it with Steve, and it was weirdly done. And they really should have thought more about it before they did it. But I do understand why they did it. Now, with that being said, I hope that every Wonder Woman movie from now on isn't like, how can we bring Steve back? Like, okay.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I will say this about my idea of the reincarnation situation of his being, him being a descendant. As long as there wasn't sex involved before she realized and he realized who he really was, then it wouldn't have been an issue. Because then at that point, then it would have been like, okay, yeah, it's creepy that I'm attracted to my former lover's great nephew or whatnot that looks like him, but at least it's a separate person with their own mind who's actually knows what the hell he's doing. And I mean, I'm immortal, so what am I going to do? I can't have somebody, I can't have a normal relationship where humans are concerned, because I'm going to outlive all of them. Right. So my thoughts were, at least in that scenario, it's kind of like, okay, well, now he knows who he is. He's not the real Steve Trevor. He knows who I am, and he can enjoy himself. Remember.
I kind of wished that either at the end or even maybe somewhere in the beginning that she had either met him, the real guy, first, and they had an attraction to each other.
Right. Something
then
that
the thing happened
yeah.
or something. Or even at the end, instead of just like this quick little flirty scene that I don't know. It's hard because they should have just not done it at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
at the
we
end
or
of the
done it
day.
a different way. Yeah.
Or a different way.
Right.
Yeah, I gotta say I like the reverse of the fish out of water, where
I love
Steve is the one who doesn't know what the heck's going on, and Diana is the one guiding him through it.
Right.
Some people thought that was like a retread, and I was like, no, it's a reversal. It's a flip flop, and to me that was interesting enough.
Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.